Hi, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I'm excited to be here with you all. It's going to be a really interesting webinar, and we have an IT expert with us today, Dan Miley. He's not just an IT expert, he also is a security expert. And so he's here to lend some of his wisdom. And after our meeting is over, I'm going to email each of you some links to extra resources, including some ways to test your staff on their cybersecurity expertise as far as identifying phishing emails and such. I'm also going to send you some information from the AMA and some documents to help you prepare your practice or re-prepare your practice. If you would get your phones out, we're going to have a QR code coming up here, and this will allow you to scan it and answer the poll. So let's get started. Here's the question. Has your practice been affected by this cyber attack? If you would scan that and answer the poll. In the meantime, I wanted to share with you that I have a lot of clients who I've talked to who have experienced this ransomware attack. I had a client who a few years ago had a ransom attack to their EMR system. They paid the ransom and spent the whole weekend recovering files. And on Monday, they were struck again by the same people. And it was an absolute nightmare. I also know of a practice since the Change Healthcare cyber attack who had to lay off 3 staff members. Another had to take a bank loan, which was a burden to them because they hadn't budgeted for the interest. A third had to tap into their line of credit. I also have a client who has finally received some money from Change Healthcare, but there were no EOBs provided. So, who knows who that belongs to? They can't even put it in their books, and they can't bill anyone because they don't know if their insurance is paid or not. It's caused a host of issues. Today, we're going to learn exactly what happened, who Change Healthcare is, what types of and how many providers were affected. And then we're going to chat with Dan Miley, our IT expert, who will share the most important steps your practice must take to keep your network as ironclad as possible. We have got the responses are we have half of you all that say that you've been attacked by the cyber attack. So I'm glad you're here. This was a quote from a gentleman named Roger Spitz. He said the importance of epistemic cybersecurity is now comparable to national security. So epistemic refers to cybersecurity that could do, or cyber incidents that could do damage on a national or even a global scale, threatening the digital infrastructure that entire societies, economies, and governments rely on to function. Systemic cybersecurity risk is possibly that a single failure somewhere in cyberspace could cause widening ripples and create catastrophic consequences. Where most cyber events are narrowly defined set of victims, a systemic cyber attack could do damage more globally. So let's talk about who Change Healthcare is. So Change Healthcare is one of the largest health payment processing companies in the world. It acts as a clearinghouse for 15 billion medical claims a year. Change Healthcare is owned by United Health Group and manages healthcare technology pipelines connected to tasks such as processing insurance claims and billing. According to the Washington Post, the Justice Department in a 2022 lawsuit cited United as stating that 50% of US medical claims go through Change's electronic data interchange clearinghouse. Change Healthcare, which is owned by United Health Group, manages healthcare technologies and their pipelines connected to tasks such as processing insurance claims and billing, reportedly handling 15 billion transactions annually. The hack of Change Healthcare affected billing and insurance confirmation, prior authorization portals. It's led to prescription backlogs and missed revenue for providers, posing potential threats to worker paychecks and even patient care. Change Healthcare runs a blockchain that processes 30 million transactions per day. The company plays a crucial role in US healthcare. It acts as a clearinghouse for insurance claims with both the healthcare providers and insurers as clients. In 2017, the business processed $1 trillion in claims. Putting that in context, in the same year, US healthcare expenditure was estimated at 3.5 trillion, which accounted for 18% of the gross domestic product. McKesson, the giant pharma distribution company, owns 70% of Change Healthcare. In mid-2016, McKesson merged its IT activities with the original Change Healthcare owned by Blackstone Private Equity. On February 21, 2024, at 11:45 a.m. Central Time, the Change Healthcare cyber attack happened. It had a roughly $870 million impact on United Health Group since March. Now we're into May. Change Healthcare discovered a breach, and there were medical, dental, and 90% of nation's pharmacies disrupted. On February 29th, Black Cat was the group that was confirmed as a criminal gang. They are Russian speaking, although last I've heard the latest updates, which they're not really being forthcoming in the news about this. You have to search for this information online. So Black Cat was confirmed as a criminal gang, and they are Russian speaking, although as of now, the US government does not believe that they are affiliated with Russia, or they haven't confirmed that. Is probably a better way to say that. On March 1st, the company conceded both that it had paid the cyber criminals extorting it and that patient data nonetheless ended up on the dark web. March 5th, medical claims flowing through Change Healthcare's network, some exchanges were back online, and the priority was to continue the flow of claims and build on functionality and focus on increased connectivity with payers, trading partners, and submitters. The most important thing to get claims flowing at pre-incident levels is having a critical mass of payer connectivity established. Meanwhile, a temporary funding assistance program for providers was set up through Optum, which is also owned by United Health Group. United Health Group said in its March 7th update that, quote, further funding solutions, unquote, involving advanced payments would be offered to provider partners of United Healthcare, its health benefits business, and that the Optum program would be expanded to, quote, include providers who have exhausted all available connection options and who work with a payer who has opted not to advance funds to providers during the period when Change Healthcare systems remain down. Now, that all sounds very altruistic, doesn't it? They are offering further funding solutions to providers who have been affected. But there's some caveats here. It's not as altruistic as it sounds. If you want to get this money, which will only be 10% of what they think you're owed, you have to sign an agreement holding them or not holding them liable for this disruption. And beyond that, they also have other conditions, one of which is that when they call the loan, the provider only has 5 days to pay it. So it's not as much of a wonderful thing as they portray it to be. On March 5th, Medicare providers needed to change clearinghouses. They were told to change their clearinghouses that they use for claims processing during these outages, and that they should contact their Medicare administrator contractor, MAC, to request a new electronic data interchange, EDI enrollment for that switch. On March 27th, nearly $4.7 billion was made available to providers in need, and they pledged to continue providing financial support to providers through full system recovery. However, as I mentioned, it was totally misrepresented in their statements because of the extra terms, getting only 10% or less of the revenue they'd lost and having 5 days to repay the loan once it's called, and to sign a waiver of liability. On April 3rd, there were significant enhancements available to providers who receive payments from payers processed by Change Healthcare, United Healthcare, medical, dental, and vision providers, and providers who have exhausted all available connection options or are in the process of implementing workaround solutions, and work with other payers who have opted not to advance funds while the change systems are down. 2,627 payers were listed as in May as information whether the provider needed to re-enroll with the payer. So they released to these 2,627 payers information about whether they had to re-enroll. Medicare providers needed to change clearinghouses that they use for claims processing during these outages, and they said that they could contact their MAC to request a new EDI enrollment for the switch. CMS also issued guidance for Medicare Advantage organizations and Part D sponsors, encouraging them to remove or relax prior authorization, other utilization management, and timely filing requirements during these system outages. CMS is also encouraging MA plans, Medicare Advantage plans, to offer advanced funding to providers most affected by the cyber attack. Change Healthcare then contacted all MACs to ensure that they were ready for accepting paper claims. We're going to watch a quick video because there were Senate hearings about this breach, and in this next video they are questioning the CEO of Change Healthcare. Okay, looks like my link is not working. So what did we learn from the Change Healthcare cybersecurity breach? What are our lessons that we've learned? Well, the attack occurred because United Health wasn't using multi-factor authentication. That's an industry standard practice. And here they have all this protected health information, and they don't have multi-factor authentication to secure one of their most critical systems. It's estimated that a third of Americans had their sensitive information leaked to the dark web as a result of this attack. This might not be the end of leaks. Despite United Health paying a ransom to the criminals, it can't guarantee that more of American sensitive information will not be leaked. I also learned that although 1/3 of Americans' information ended up on the dark web, that people who wanted to find out if their information was leaked onto the dark web had to pay the cyber criminals $3 to check and see if their information was there. And if it was, then they charged them $50 to remove it. So they're not just siphoning money off of the corporation, they're siphoning money off of the victims. We're going to have a quick commercial break. I want to tell you about iTech training. We train technicians and we develop administrators. We have been in business for 14 years and we've worked with practices worldwide. And you might wonder why we're holding this webinar today. It's so that we can be the ultimate resource for ophthalmic administrators. We have a bunch of services that might benefit your practice, including new technician training boot camps. We get them on the floor in 5 days, doing all the workup skills. We do comprehensive scribe training. We do practice productivity evaluations and equipment training, among many other things. If you'd like to learn more, here's our website. All right, I'd like to introduce Dan Miley, our IT expert. He's going to jump on now and give you some of his expertise related to this cyber breach.
Hi, Sharon. Thanks for having me on. This seems like a very timely subject, and I appreciate the time that you're giving. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great. Thanks for
Okay,
asking.
good. You know that I did watch the video that got skipped, and there was a couple big items in there. Choice Healthcare is a $1 trillion company. They're the fifth largest company, I think they're the fifth largest company in the world or in the US stock market, maybe. This is the biggest breach costing in history. And the uh, United Healthcare and their subsidiaries are gobbling up the healthcare industry. That's one thing that they mentioned. And they paid $22 million in Bitcoin for the to get the unlock codes for their servers and clients. So this is a huge attack. That the reason that the cyber criminals do this because they make a lot of money. It's interesting how many cyber attacks are reported, but there is so many more. There's probably 100 times that many that are attempted every day. If you have a firewall on your network and you go in and look at the logs, you'll see people trying to connect. You'll see people trying to connect to your website, to your servers, and all that type of thing. But if they can't get in, they'll go on to the next guy. They have robots that go out and do the scans and look for certain vulnerabilities and that type of thing. The average cost per attack for cyber attacks is really high because of one, the ransom. If you have to pay the ransom to the criminal, the other problem is if you don't pay the ransom, then you have to recover all your systems because they're completely locked, encrypted, and you can't get back into them. So you either have to manually reinstall everything, go out to the vendor, get new software, get your data back from somewhere if you have a backup. If you don't have a backup, you may have to type it in again. So there's just huge amounts of cost to the business to be able to recover from one of these attacks. One thing that they mentioned in that video was that this particular payer did not have minimum security standards set up. As Sharon mentioned, they did not have two-factor authentication where it sends a PIN or a code to your phone where you have to know a password and have a device or any type of two-factor authentication. They had not had any good security audits in years, and right now they have a cybersecurity expert on board, but apparently they did not before. So it's a difficult thing to get the scope around how much of an impact this is. I know it had a big impact on everybody in this conference. So uh, next slide, Sharon. There is an ecosystem of hackers that support these services. So there are hackers that go out and look for vulnerabilities. There are social engineering hackers that call up and say they're the help desk and ask for your password. There's help desk people that there's sales people that sell these services. They'll sell 100 robots to go out and scan for a certain vulnerability, or they'll sell what they call spear phishing services, where they might find out as much as they can about a single person who is the head of purchasing and send them a specific email saying, I'm with company blah blah blah, I would like you to change my payment information. So then the person in accounts payable, if he follows through with that and changes that payment information, now instead of paying Verizon or whoever, they're paying the criminals, and their Verizon payments not getting paid for several months. So there's a lot of different pieces to cybersecurity and to the way the hackers got into these systems. And what I'm going to try and do is tell you a few things that can help to prevent them from getting in your net. Um, you need to spread the word with your employees to be secure, to be um, what's the word? To be cautious about things that come in. Keep an eye out for misspellings, for someone who says they're from one company but their email says something different. That's an important uh, piece, is just paying attention and being a little bit cautious about those things. If you have mobile devices on your network, if you connect your phone, your iPhone to your office network, those devices need to be updated. They need to have some type of antivirus. There's a tool called Lookout that works for Android that does security scanning and such like that. The mobile devices are a little bit difficult because they're usually updated by your provider. So you have to go and sometimes manually go in and do updates on them. But that's an important pathway for hackers to be able to get in. You need to maintain good computer habits in terms of uh, changing your passwords on a regular basis. Usually every 30 to 90 days, you should change your passwords. You should have a complex password that has numbers, letters, punctuation. You should not share your passwords between users. Don't have the same password for 10 users, because somebody might call up and say, hey, what's today's password? Now they're in. On your network, use a firewall. If your provider provides a modem and wireless and internet, that might not be a good firewall. You might want to think about putting a firewall behind your internet modem to give another layer of security to protect your network. Use antivirus on your workstations and your servers. Make sure that it's up to date. There are some free antivirus. There are several good ones that are paid by subscription. Norton, McAfee. Uh, some of the free ones I think are Clam and AVG. So there's a bunch of options there. Make sure they have automatic updates and make sure the updates are turned on. This is a big one. Number 6, plan for the unexpected. You should back up your data. Everything that you do not want to type in again needs to be backed up to another device that is not connected to your network. So if you suppose you have a server and you have a bunch of clients and you buy a big hard disk and you back up everything to that hard disk, and then someone gets in your server and that hard disk is plugged into the network, they would encrypt it and it would be gone. So you need to have a rotation of your backups so that every other week you have 2 hard disks and you swap it out and take one off site. That also protects you from fire or earthquake or flood if somebody comes in and steals your equipment. Physical access. You need to control access to your physical devices. Come in, a patient or a vendor or something like that can't come in and just stick a thumb drive in your server. Then that thumb drive can call home to the hacker's network and they have access. We talked about passwords and changing them often. You want to use passwords that are easy to remember but difficult for people to figure out. You don't want to use regular words. You don't want to use your birth date or something like that. Frequently, what people will do is use a phrase like, for example, I love spaghetti. So they would do IL spaghetti rather than the whole, using each word. There's a whole bunch of websites that will make difficult, complex passwords for you. Also, most of the browsers have a password manager. Google Chrome has a password manager that will keep track of your passwords. Those are very good to use. There's also standalone password managers. There's one called KeePass that will keep track of your passwords for you. All you need is one master password to get into it, and then it will send the passwords to your website, but it keeps them encrypted. Limit your network access. If you have a guest network in your office, or if you have people who maybe bring in a laptop from home, you want that to be separate from your office network. You want your guest network not to be the same network as where your servers and that type of thing are. Control physical access. If you have the ability to put a locked door in front of where your IT equipment is, that is an excellent idea. Either a key or a keypad or something like that, so that people can't physically get in and use get access through a thumb drive or through the keyboard. The way that the Black Cat hacker group got in was they had a remote access portal that allowed people to get into do payments, to do claims, to do coding and all that stuff. Well, that system was vulnerable. So they got in and found a vulnerability, exploited it, and got access as a user. Once they got access as a user, they were in the system. Then once they were in the system, they started gradually increasing their privileges. They got a user account and password. Then they looked and found a server password. Then they may have found a system administrator password. Then they might have found a full global administrator password that has access to everything. At that point, they were owned. Uh, I believe there's some analysis now that shows that the hackers were actually in the Choice network for about a week, 5 to 7 days, before they actually pulled the trigger and encrypted everything. So what they did was they went in and they did what's called data exfiltration. They got in, they did their reconnoitering, they got into the accounts that they needed, and then they pulled out all of the customer data as much as they could. I'm not sure the exact number of records, but it was just a huge, they said a third of the US, so a huge number of personal information. I don't know how much and what the exact personal information, but I know inside the claims there's diagnosis, there's all kinds of treatments, there's social security numbers. So they pulled all that data out and made a copy of it. Then they locked up everything and shut the system down. So at that point, everybody got a message on their computer saying your computer's locked. Please send X amount of dollars to, and they had an anonymous drop that they used for paying the Bitcoin. Well, it turns out Choice did pay. I think they discussed it quite a bit, but they did actually pay the ransom. And to the hackers, they paid the ransom to the hackers that locked up the machine. But if you'll remember, there's an ecosystem of hackers. And the hackers that locked up the machine did not pay the Black Hat people who were part of the back end infrastructure to do the work and to collect the Bitcoin. And so there was a falling out of the Black Cat hacker group, and apparently they got dissolved. And I don't think anybody knows where that money ended up. But the hackers that actually broke in, that did not get paid. So then after Choice got their systems back, they got hacked again. They got hacked a second time, and I believe they got another ransom request. So that's just that's kind of the that's kind of the path that they took. So the challenge that we have as people who support IT systems is that those hackers can have 1,000 different ways to get in. They can have a vulnerability, they can have a web page. In this case, it was a Citrix portal application that they found a vulnerability in. There's 1,000 different places that us as system administrators have to lock down and secure. And that's what some of those automatic updates and security updates and stuff can do for you. But they only need one opening to get in. So what we want to do is we want to try and make it as difficult as possible for them to be able to get in to our networks. Okay, next. Yeah, let's see here. So cyber attacks are very profitable. There's we already talked a little bit about the ecosystem of different back office processes that they do. There's reconnaissance, there's social engineering, payment processing. They have a help desk. They have application. They even have support for their applications. They the uh, the change group decided to pay, but they also expected these thieves to be honest and give them all their stuff back. And it turns out the thieves were not honest and they kept the data and they got hacked again through the same group. So it's difficult to decide whether to pay or whether to not to pay. But this has caused a huge impact to doctors, providers, um, prescription providers. It's just crazy that from what I understand this year there has been over $16 billion worth of ransom paid. I think that's a stat from the FBI. But there's some links here which I think Sharon was going to send in an email. There's a infosec magazine which goes into real depth if you're interested in reading about it. There's a CBS News report, which I think includes a link to the 60 Minutes article about young Americans working with Russians. So they have a team thing. They have Russians that do the development and the hacking, and they have Americans that do some of the reconnaissance and social engineering and know the accents and know the culture of the targets. There's another story there under Wired, which is a different ransomware that works a little bit differently. But I thought it was a very interesting discussion because they actually caught that guy. And I believe he had stolen $500 million over the period of a couple years of doing his hacking. And he taunted the FBI and said, "You're never ever going to find me." And finally they did. So that was one of the ones. I don't think they found the money, but they did get him. They didn't get everybody on his crew either. And then there's another article from CNN about how this did impact the healthcare networks. So there's a lot of good information, a lot of good reading there. What we want to do though is we want to try and allow you to be a little bit more secure with your uh, with your office, with your site, with your clients, and with your employees. So my suggestion, if you do not have a IT person uh, who is well versed in security, it's worthwhile to get a consultation with a provider. Find a provider. You might have to interview a couple different providers to find one that you feel comfortable with their cybersecurity credentials. And there's certifications from multiple different vendors that provide security certification, firewall certification, uh, security administration, that type of thing. And what you want to do is you want to ask your providers and ask your partners to see the results of their last security audit. So if you use a provider for your healthcare record system, it's perfectly reasonable to ask them, well, when was your last audit and can I see the results? Because in theory, they do outside audits that go in and look for these vulnerabilities and allow them to fix them. Having vulnerabilities is not necessarily a bad thing. That happens all the time. But it's what is their plan to fix them and how long have those been sitting there open? Because Choice said that these vulnerabilities had been on their network for years. So talk to your employees and partners about cyber hygiene. Okay, so that's the people that you work with and that work for you. Make sure they understand about passwords, changing passwords, not sharing, not opening email attachments, paying attention to the text and who you're talking to. If somebody says they're from if somebody says they're from your bank, call your bank. Don't take their word for it. Call back your bank, because a lot of times these cyber hackers can talk you into, they're very good at their job. They can talk you in to believing them. And it's like any other con. They get your confidence and then all of a sudden they're gone. Don't share your password or username with anyone. Uh, Having the administrator of your network be a regular user is not a good idea. On your server, on your network, there should be an administrator account that is separate from the users. That way you're not using it all the time. Don't share your pin, or if you have a phone, like a text message with a code in it, don't share that with anybody. That's one of the ways they get into bank accounts, is they'll say, I'm testing from the bank, we're going to send you a pin code, please tell me the pin, when really they're on your account trying to get in, and it's sending the two-factor authentication to you. Once you give it to them, they have it. Make sure you have a plan. Think about what would happen if the lights were turned off in your office. If there was no power to your server, it was down, it was unavailable. Have a backup of your systems off site. And once in a while, test and make sure that your data is there. Make sure that the latest records are on there. Make sure that the updates are happening to your backup. Run antivirus and Windows updates. If you have Macs, run the updates from Apple on all of your systems, and use multi-factor authentication. There are several companies that will do multi-factor authentication for your systems as a service. I know Google has an authenticator. Microsoft has an authenticator. There's another one called Duo. I'm not sure what the costs on those are, but wherever it's possible, it's best to do that. That seems to be a common next step for most security functions. Let's see here. We had talked about health, health information. There is a lot of good information um, about securing PCI, securing health information from the government. And I think Sharon also has a couple links that she's going to be sending out. I have a couple handouts for talking to your employees about security and making security policies. So I think that's kind of the high level that I was going to cover. I think I see a couple things in the chat. I don't know, Sharon, do you want to address those or?
Yeah, so C. Freitag said, I have received 4 emails in a month impersonating our doctors, asking me to change their direct deposit account information.
Oh yeah, yeah. Now, the right thing to do there is say, let me call you right back on your cell, or please send me an email in writing, And I happen to know a company that got hacked from about $500,000 because they were making payments to an account that belonged to some hackers that did exactly that, to a payroll person. They found a payroll person who would change the information as a director of the company. Yeah. That's
Well, that
crazy.
information was very rich, Dan. Thank you so much. I appreciate
Appreciate your time.
oh yeah, the handouts that you sent to me, which I will send to all the attendees, are also full of great information. After this webinar, I'm going to send you the videos of the Senate hearings, a link to them. I'm also going to send you all the links in this course and the handouts. So a lot more information is on its way to you. This webinar will be posted on my website within 24 hours, and it's itechtraining.com/webinars. Our next webinar is Thursday, May 30th at 2 p.m. East. In this webinar, to be the next in our series, Post-COVID Staff Retention Strategies. We will send you a link to this webinar following this course today. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you joining and hope that you all have a good day with no cyber attacks.